The credential exchange took 4 minutes. That was the whole ceremony. 2 officials, 2 cards, a brief bow at each transfer, and then we were seated across a white lacquered table in the vel'shaan conclave tower, while the city spread out behind the glass in every direction, pale and clean, and lit by a sun that was slightly more orange than ours. I have done this 31 times. Different species, different towers, different suns. The credential card is always the same. A formal declaration of role and authority, issued by your government and presented to theirs. You give them yours, they give you theirs. You log it, your translator scans it. You set it face up on the table in front of you for the duration of the negotiation, and when you leave, you file it. I set the vel'shaan card face up and began. The colony at Heron's Point had been formally designated a wilderness reclamation zone by the vel'shaan Ecological Sovereignty Board 14 months prior. 47,000 people, 5 generations of settlement. The board's position was simple. We had built on a migratory corridor. We had been given 18 months' notice, and now the notice period had elapsed. They were not interested in our failure to leave. They were interested in when we would finish Eifling. My position was equally simple. We were not leaving. The vel'shaan lead negotiator was a being called vel'soran Chast, and she had the patient, faintly amused manner of someone who had watched this conversation happen many times, and already knew how it ended. She was taller than any of us, pale gold in the conclave's overhead light, and she had a translator node fitted at her throat that turned her speech into something flat and faintly mechanical. She spoke in long, even sentences. She had brought documentation. She was very organized. We talked for 3 hours. I made 7 formal objections. She noted each one and set them aside with the same quiet efficiency. I presented the survey data on the migratory corridor. The corridor had shifted 200 kilometers east in the last 40 years due to the vel'shaan's own terraforming activity on the adjacent continent. She noted that also and set it aside. At the first recess, I stepped out with my translator, Mira Ossel, into an anteroom that smelled of some warm mineral compound I couldn't name. Mira was looking at her screen with an expression I had learned to pay attention to. She had been scanning the credential card as background process during the session. "There's boilerplate on the reverse," she said. I waited. 7 glyphs, old script. I had to pull the deep dictionary layer to parse it. Standard footer text, from the look of it. Dad, they've been printing it on diplomatic credential cards for at least 400 years. It's in the Office of Ancestral Reckoning's formatting style. That's their oldest institutional body, the one that manages debt and obligation claims under traditional law. What does it say? Mira read it twice before she answered. She did that sometimes when she wasn't certain the translation was landing right, and she wanted to be certain. "Beer is owed a life," she said. I looked at her. "Not metaphorically," she said. "It's a debt-binding phrase. Under vel'shaan ancestral reckoning law, any credential issued by an official body that carries this footer text creates a formal, enforceable obligation between the issuing institution and the recipient of the credential. It was designed to cover situations where a diplomat was killed or harmed while under official protection. The issuing government becomes obligated to make the bearer whole, or, in cases where the bearer is operating on behalf of a larger group, term a life scales. It's interpreted as the restoration of equivalent standing. 47,000 people, I said. Equivalent standing, Mira said again. Restoration of the colony to its prior operational status would be within the scope of a formal ancestral reckoning claim, especially given that the credential was issued to you in your formal capacity as colony representative. Picked up the card from the table beside me and turned it over. 7 glyphs in a small, neat row at the bottom of the reverse face, embossed in the same gold foil as the conclave seal at the top, small. Printed automatically. I was certain, a formatting template that had been running unchanged for 4 centuries, while the Office of Ancestral Reckoning handled bigger concerns and nobody thought to audit the footer. I went back into the negotiation. I let another 40 minutes pass. vel'soran Chast laid out the resettlement support package the vel'shaan were prepared to offer. Transit credits, temporary housing allocation on a Station 6 transit jumps from Heron's Point, and a formal letter of acknowledgement that would have no legal standing but could, she said, be framed and displayed if that was culturally meaningful to us. I thanked her for the thorough presentation. Then I placed the credential card face down on the table and slid it 2 centimeters toward the center, not all the way to her, just into the shared space between us. I'd like to discuss the reverse, I said. The translator node rendered it in the same flat mechanical tone she used for everything. Chast looked at the card, then at me. The footer text, I said, 7 glyphs. Bearer is owed a life. Your Office of Ancestral Reckoning formatting template, generation 412 of the standard diplomatic credential design. We've run the deep dictionary parse. We have the obligation instrument. We are formally invoking it. The room was quiet for a long time. One of the junior members of the vel'shaan delegation reached forward and turned the card over. Read the footer. Said something in a rapid undertone that the translator node didn't catch, because it was aimed at Chast and not at us. Chast looked at the card for several seconds. Her expression did not change in any way I could clearly read. Something shifted in the quality of her stillness. She was, I understood, doing the same calculation I had already done. 400 years, hundreds of thousands of credentials issued. Every diplomat who had ever entered a vel'shaan conclave tower and received a standard credential card, technically the bearer of a life-depth instrument. Nobody had ever invoked it because nobody had ever read the footer. It had been boilerplate for so long that it had stopped being language. It was just print. Until it wasn't. The claim process took 11 days. The vel'shaan legal apparatus was meticulous. I had expected that, and they challenged the instrument on 8 separate procedural grounds. And Mira and I sat in a smaller room in the conclave tower for those 11 days and answered every challenge. Every challenge collapsed against the plain text of the obligation. The Office of Ancestral Reckoning, when called upon to adjudicate, found for the bearer. It was their own law. It was their own word. It was their own footer. Heron's points restored to colony status on the 53rd day after I first sat down across from Vel'sor and Chast. I was not there for the announcement. I was on a transit shuttle to the next system where I was supposed to begin building toward a formal alliance framework. Something larger, something that would have meant security guarantees and joint resource agreements for a dozen settlements along the frontier. That meeting did not happen. The vel'shaan had already sent notice by the time my shuttle docked. They would not be participating. They were suspending all diplomatic engagement with human representatives indefinitely, pending an internal review of their credential issuance protocols and their negotiation framework. They did not use the word humiliated. They did not need to. I had gone to the table to save 47,000 people and to build something that might have protected 200,000 more. I saved the 47,000. I won the argument I had. I lost the room I was trying to build. That is the whole of it. I still have the credential card. It sits in the front pocket of my case, which I carry everywhere, and I take it out sometimes in the long transit hours between one system and another, and I look at the footer text. 7 glyphs, foil on pale gray. A debt 4 centuries in the making, never noticed. Printed on every card by a machine that had not been questioned since. Before my species found its way off its home world. I do not know if I would do it differently. I have thought about it the way you think about a bone that healed crooked. It holds the weight. You can feel where it went wrong. What I know is this. They printed the words. They chose the law. They issued the card. I only read it.